She had worked 9 hours straight, her body aching, her feet numb. And at the end of it all, she walked away with $1 in tips. The rest, every cent left by customers who smiled and thanked her, had somehow ended up in the pocket of a young man who never once carried a cup of coffee to a table. He just stood there, stationed next to the glowing register she wasn't even allowed to touch. That morning, Jackson Pryor walked into the Sunrise Café. No fanfare, no announcement, just a plain shirt, worn jeans, and a quiet presence that didn't ask for attention. He looked like any other man grabbing a meal between shifts. No one knew he had once founded this place. He had come back not to be recognized, but to remember. Evelyn May approached his table, setting down the coffee with care, her hands delicate, movements practiced. Her voice, soft but firm, carried the weight of quiet resignation. 9 hours, $1, but I'm used to it. She didn't linger for pity. She turned and walked away, and Jackson just watched her go. There was something in his eyes that shifted. A flicker of memory or guilt, maybe both. The cafe hummed with an old soul charm. A record player crackled under the weight of slow-turning jazz. Sunlight poured through lace curtains, bathing cracked leather booths in a soft golden hue. It should have felt timeless, safe. But behind the counter there was tension in the air that didn't match the warmth of the room. Smiles too rehearsed, movements too quick. Evelyn cleaned the same spot twice, not because it was dirty, but because it gave her hands something to do. A younger worker dropped a tray and flinched before the noise even hit the ground. No one scolded him, but fear had already done the job. Jackson watched from the shadows near the window. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He observed. His eyes found Trent, tall, well-groomed, detached from the rhythm of the cafe. He didn't touch coffee, or plates, or people. Just the register. Every card, every tip passed through him. Evelyn passed by again. Her steps were steady, but they carried the weight of being overlooked too many times. Not tired, not weak, just worn thin from being invisible in plain sight. Jackson's eyes narrowed. Something here didn't add up. There was a beautiful illusion in the jazz and sunlight, but beneath it, something was off, something cold. From his seat, Jackson watched the dance of this cafe unfold. But certain players never left the stage. Evelyn, Clara, the older staff. They never touched the register. They hovered near it like it was a relic behind glass. And Trent? He stood guard over it like it was his birthright. Customers tipped by card. Evelyn received the smiles, the thanks, the nods of appreciation, but never the tips. Once, a man handed her a receipt with a tip circled. She thanked him gently, but instead of logging it, she slid it onto the counter. Trent picked it up. No eye contact, no words, just numbers on a screen and paper into a drawer. Jackson sipped nothing. His coffee remained untouched. His pen, however, moved. In his notebook he began sketching patterns, not in the foam of the drink, but in power, in who held control and who was erased from it. Trent looked polished, his shirt crisp, his shoes clean, his hands always busy but never helpful. He didn't carry trays or refill cups. He carried control. Jackson recognized the performance. He'd seen this before, in boardrooms, in meetings, in other men's mistakes. The younger staff lingered near Trent, maybe drawn to his authority, maybe too afraid to challenge it. The older ones? They kept their distance, especially Evelyn. At table 7, a man tipped $5. Evelyn set the receipt down at the counter's edge like it was something fragile. Trent scooped it up, typed something in, and tucked it away. Again, 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 always the same rhythm. Jackson's notes grew sharper. "She does the work," he wrote, "so why does someone else cash the reward?" He watched Evelyn closely. Her service wasn't routine. It was an act of memory, of care, of human connection. She poured water without spilling a drop, leaned down to an older gentleman and said, "Extra lemon, Mr. Garrison," without being asked. His eyes lit up. Someone remembered. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't forget names. Her presence wasn't flashy, it was genuine. And yet, when the bill was paid, she offered thanks and moved on. She didn't touch the receipts, didn't log the tips, just folded napkins and cleared empty plates. Jackson wrote faster now. His eyes didn't leave her. The cafe was emptying. Dishes clinked into bins. Chairs scraped against the floor. But Evelyn kept moving. Quiet, efficient, invisible. She wiped tables, stacked menus, straightened sugar holders like it all still mattered. Then, when no one watched, she reached into her apron and pulled out something small. A worn leather notebook, soft at the edges from years of touch. 3 small letters, barely legible under the fold. E. May, 1978. She held it close for a moment, like it held more than notes, like it held part of her. Then she slipped it into her bag. Jackson noticed everything, the way she touched it, the care in her fingers. That wasn't just a notebook. That was a story, a memory, a lifeline. And it told him everything he needed to know. This woman mattered more to the soul of this place than any man behind a screen. And somehow, she was the only one not being seen. That notebook mattered. Not just for what it held, but because somewhere along the way, someone convinced Evelyn that no one else would care, that her truth wasn't valid unless someone important said it out loud. Down the narrow hallway behind the kitchen, life was quieter, slower. Jackets swayed gently on rusty hooks. A faded corkboard whispered birthdays and forgotten potlucks. Jackson lingered near the doorway, half concealed by a shelf, just in time to catch a fragile moment unfolding. Evelyn stood near the sink, her voice soft, low, like she was guarding the words even as she said them. "I write it down," she told Clara, who stood beside her drying her hands. "Not because I think it'll change anything. Just to know I'm not losing it, even if no one else says they see." Clara folded the towel with quiet precision. She didn't look up, but her words landed like an anchor. "They see," she said, almost a whisper. "They just don't want to be the first one to say it." Jackson didn't breathe, didn't blink. He stayed still in the shadows, absorbing every syllable. And in that stillness, something fell into place. This wasn't just about tips or miscounted receipts. It was deeper. A kind of soft erasure. One that didn't shout, but erased all the same. The scent of bacon and fresh brewed coffee pulled him into an older memory. One that wasn't his, but somehow familiar. A smaller diner, long before the polished image of Sunrise Café. Checkerboard floors. A kitchen door that always swung just a bit too wide. Evelyn stood behind a counter back then, apron starched, hair neat, her posture proud. Beside her was a man with kind eyes and a crooked grin. He stacked plates with one hand and poured orange juice with the other. Their movements were in sync, like they'd done this dance 1,000 mornings. When the shift ended, he dropped a fistful of coins into a glass jar. She followed, without hesitation. No debate, no math. "Fair is fair," he smiled. "Doesn't matter who carried more, we carried it together." Evelyn had laughed then. Not politely, but with a kind of joy that melted walls. She leaned into him, the kind of lean that meant trust, the kind that made it home. The memory faded, but something lingered. Jackson didn't know that part of her life, not yet. But every time she wiped the counter just a little too long, he started to feel its ghost. This was never about just money. It was about shared weight, about unspoken promises, about what they used to believe in. Now the cafe closed with a hush. No laughter. Just the mechanical hum of a fridge and the quiet clink of forks being rolled into napkins. Evelyn counted bills under the low kitchen light. Her hands moved slowly, methodically. Behind her, a man, maybe that same one from her memory, dried his hands, watching her with quiet warmth. "Fairness doesn't live in a system," he'd said once, not looking up. "It lives in how we treat each other." Evelyn had paused, her hand hovering over the shared tip jar. She didn't nod with her head. She nodded with something deeper, something that understood. That jar's long gone now, swallowed by technology. But the lesson remained, scrawled between the pages of her worn leather notebook like scripture. She picked up another receipt, still warm from the printer. Handwritten across the corner, $5. A quiet thank you from a man she'd served for over a decade. She walked to the counter and folded it gently. She didn't even hesitate, just placed it by the register, like a ritual she'd performed 1,000 times. Trent didn't look at her. He just picked it up, typed a few numbers, slid it away. The screen blinked. Tip received, $0. Evelyn didn't speak, didn't flinch. She pulled out the leather notebook, flipped to a page already half filled. Her pen moved with purpose. Date, time, table, amount given, amount shown. She closed it slowly, reverently, like it was holding her together. Across the room, Jackson saw every detail, every pattern, every silence. She wasn't making guesses. She was gathering proof, and she'd been doing it alone. That night, Jackson sat in his car across the street, the windshield fogging under the weight of his breath. The cafe's light flickered behind the curtains. He unlocked his phone, tapped into the back-end security feed, a system he still had access to from long ago. Hours of footage blurred together, customers, servers, card swipes, tip inputs, over and over again. Trent's hands, Trent's login, Trent's name. Evelyn was never at the terminal, nor was Clara, nor anyone older than 30. He checked the access list. Only 3 names had permission to process tips. Evelyn's wasn't one of them. Jackson shut the screen, staring back at the window. The truth wasn't hidden. It was just written in what wasn't there. The next morning he showed up early, carried a small box, napkins, sleeves, sugar packets. No one questioned him. Trent wasn't in yet. Ramona was still in the back. Jackson moved like someone who belonged. Behind the counter, beneath the register, he crouched low. From his jacket pocket, he retrieved a small, silent device. A tracker, smooth, matte black, the size of a thumb drive. He pressed it into place under the register ledge. It clicked once. Quiet, undetected. He stood, dusted off his hands, grabbed a stack of napkins. No alarms, no eyes, just another morning. The device would now log every access, every login, every tip entry, real data, unfiltered, undeniable. Jackson didn't want assumptions. He wanted truth. Because once truth is recorded, it has a way of demanding to be seen. Later, in the back near the sink, Clara washed dishes, her back hunched, her shoulders tired. Jackson approached slowly, towel in hand, pretending to dry spoons. "You ever feel like something's off?" he asked, keeping it light. She paused, just a beat. But her eyes shifted toward the register, then back to the suds. "I notice everything," she said softly. "But noticing isn't the same as saying." He didn't press, just waited. Clara took a breath, slow and deep. "I'm 70, she said. "I raise my granddaughter. My meds cost more than I make. If I speak up, I'm replaceable. Seen it before. Young ones come in, fast, cheap. People like me? We don't get second chances." She went back to her work, hands slower now. Jackson said nothing, but the silence grew heavier inside him. In the break room, the air smelled of reheated soup and scorched coffee. Jackets lined the wall, name tags pinned like relics on a corkboard. Jackson scanned the space, pretending to search for stir sticks. His eyes landed on a sign taped above the microwave. Thick black marker. Bold letters. "Assistants are not permitted to operate POS terminal." Below it, a slanted signature. Ramona. The paper was fresh, no creases, no stains. It hadn't been there long. Another note sat just beneath it. Taped beneath the first notice was another sign. No signature, no initials. Just 5 words that carried the weight of silence. All digital tips must be processed by supervisor. Jackson stepped back, his face blank. It wasn't a broken system. It was a designed one. A deliberate funnel. A locked door dressed up as policy. The rule wasn't written to protect anyone. It was written to decide who gets seen and who gets erased. Out on the floor, Jackson wiped down a booth while Evelyn refilled the sugar jar at the next table. She didn't look at him when she spoke. She didn't have to. The words came out like part of a ritual she'd done 100 times. "I don't expect to get rich from this job," she said, setting the jar down with care. Her hands aligned the packets like soldiers, precise, practiced. "I don't need bonuses. I don't even need praise." Her voice dropped just enough to carry the weight. "I just want to see my name on the list. The one that says who got what." Jackson didn't respond. There wasn't a right thing to say. And maybe that silence was more honest than words. Finally, Evelyn met his eyes. Her gaze didn't beg. It didn't plead. It simply ached with quiet truth. "Most days I don't even check anymore," she said. "It's worse when I do." And then she walked away. Apron creased, back straight, dignity intact. Jackson stood still, cloth in hand, the meaning echoing inside him. It wasn't about the money. It was about being counted. Later, during his break, he sat outside with his back against the brick wall. A paper cup warmed his hands while the dashboard glowed on his phone. Branch 42's sales were strong, top 3 in the district. Average ticket totals climbing, 5-star reviews piling in, but one number stood out. Staff turnover, too high, too fast, especially for workers over 50. He scrolled through old rosters. Names came and vanished, ghosts in the system. Some lasted weeks, others just days. Jackson did the math. Performance wasn't the problem. It was pressure. And the people leaving weren't just burnt out. They were pushed out. Quietly, replaced, forgotten. He leaned his head back against the bricks. The numbers painted a shiny picture, but if people looked this tired, someone was hiding the real cost. He found Ramona near the stockroom, clipboard in hand, tapping, her pen like she was trying to beat the clock. Jackson approached, casual, wiping his hands on his apron. "Busy morning," he offered. She smiled politely. "Always is. You get used to it?" He nodded. "Noticed some folks don't touch the register. Different roles?" Ramona chuckled. A short sound, not cruel but clipped. "Oh, that's just me keeping things smooth. You know how it is." Her tone softened, like she was confiding a kindness. "Older staff forget things, hit wrong buttons, makes a mess." Her eyes stayed on the clipboard. "So I simplified things, less confusion." Jackson said nothing. Just let the words hang. She shrugged, smile still in place. "Nothing personal, just organizing the workflow." He watched her walk away. Clipboard swinging. He'd heard lies before. Big ones, bold ones. But the worst were always the soft ones, the ones dressed as logic, the ones that smiled while they erased you. Later that day, a regular, a gentleman with silver hair and pressed slacks, left a $20 bill on the counter with his receipt. "Keep the change," he said kindly to Evelyn. She offered her usual soft smile. "Thank you," and stepped back. Trent moved fast, sliding in behind the register. "I'll process it," he said, fingers dancing across the screen. Jackson watched from a distance, pretending to sort lids, but he saw it. The screen flashed. Tip destination, Branch Operations Fund. Trent confirmed without blinking. No explanation. No pause. Evelyn caught the screen too late. Her expression didn't change. She didn't ask questions, but Jackson remembered the words. Branch Operations Fund, neat, clean, untraceable, unless you knew exactly where to look. Trent turned away, whistling. It wasn't theft. It was structure. That night, Jackson sat in a dim motel room, laptop open. The tracker data loaded line by line, cold and clinical. On paper, it looked ordinary. Clean even. Tips logged. Receipts printed. Staff IDs recorded. But patterns emerged. Same register, same login, same name, every time. Clara, Evelyn, Louise. Didn't matter who served the table, the tips always landed under Trent's name. Jackson scrolled faster. Different faces, same result. It wasn't favoritism, it wasn't incompetence, it was a funnel. And Trent stood directly at the center of it. The sun was fading behind blinds when Evelyn slid into the booth across from Jackson. She carried the notebook like it was something living. Worn leather, edges curled, corners frayed. E. May, 1978, still barely legible on the front. She didn't look up, just kept her fingers resting on it. "No one listens when you're old," she said quietly. "They smile, they nod, but they forget you spoke." Then she pushed the notebook toward him. So I stopped talking. Jackson opened it slowly. Each page was methodical. Dates, table numbers, tip amounts left versus tip amounts received, notes in fine cursive, red ink circling the mismatches, quiet accusations made louder with every entry. "This isn't revenge," she said. "It's memory, because they won't remember for us." He closed the book with care. He didn't make promises. He just held the truth. That evening he sat alone at a back booth after close. The notebook lay open under dim light. He flipped through page after page, absorbing it all. Each discrepancy was small. $10 promised, $0 recorded. Cash given, never entered. Tips erased with a keystroke. But it added up. $30 here, $12 there. A slow siphon. At the bottom of the final page, Evelyn had scrawled a total. $742 missing. March to April. Not just dollars. These were hours of someone's life. Pride, precision, gone without thanks. And now, it was all documented. A sharp memory struck Evelyn like lightning. Unwelcome but familiar. Folding napkins, her hand slowed as a colder memory pushed through. A hospital hallway, buzzing lights, paper-thin walls. She was holding an envelope full of medical jargon she couldn't decipher. Final statement, hospice services. She opened her coin pouch, crumpled bills, a few coins. Tips from the last double shift, $17.38. She counted again. Still not enough. A nurse walked by, offered a kind smile. Evelyn tried to smile back, but her hands tightened around the envelope. That night, she sat by her husband's bed pretending everything was okay. He'd squeezed her fingers. Faint, but sure. "You always took care of things," he whispered. And she had. But that day she couldn't. Not without truth. Not without fairness. Back in the present, Trent leaned casually against the counter, sipping coffee like a man who hadn't lifted a plate all day. Evelyn passed by, silent, a tray balanced in her hand. Behind her, a younger server dropped a fork. Evelyn bent down to help, steady, calm. Trent smirked and raised his voice just enough. "Tips aren't a right, you know," he called out. "They're a reward. Nobody owes you one, and last I checked, sharing's optional." He chuckled, tapping the screen again. Another receipt closed. Another erasure. From the corner, Clara flinched, but said nothing. Evelyn doesn't stop walking, doesn't turn around, but her grip on the tray tightens, knuckles whitening beneath the weight of words that should never have been said aloud. Behind her, Trent smirks. Tips aren't a right, but who are they a reward for, really? Jackson watches from a booth nearby, his jaw tense, pulse rising. That sentence, so flippant, so hollow, will stay with him longer than Trent will ever realize. Later, in the break room, Jackson ties his apron slowly, deliberately. His phone sits beside a lukewarm cup of coffee, the screen dark, the mic quietly recording. He doesn't need confessions. He needs truths spoken plainly. From down the hall, laughter spills in. Trent's voice, sharp. Ramona's, dismissive. If they really cared, they'd quit already. A door creaks shut. Jackson marks the moment. In his notebook, date, time, location. Quiet power isn't loud. It's written in details. In the kitchen, his phone rests behind the napkin dispenser. Clara walks in, her eyes scanning the room before settling on the floor. Trent's voice again. The old ones don't even know how the system works. No one corrects him. No one laughs either. But Jackson listens, collects. He's not building a spreadsheet, he's building a reckoning. Later, near the back counter, Clara passes by Jackson, eyes lowered. As she nears him, she slips something into his hand, a folded scrap of receipt paper. No words, just a quiet press of fingers. He waits until the hallway is empty before reading it. Shaky handwriting. Evelyn got threatened with termination last week for asking about the tips. No signature, but he knows the script, knows the courage it took. He looks toward the dining floor. Evelyn's at table 6, smiling through fatigue. Still graceful, still steady. She has no idea her honesty made her a target. Jackson folds the note and tucks it into his pocket. His jaw tightens. This isn't about numbers anymore, or access codes. It's about silence enforced through fear. And once fear is part of the system, there's only one thing left to do. Break it. It's Saturday morning. The cafe hums with warmth. Cutlery clinks. Conversations bloom across booths. The jukebox hums low in the corner, a soft jazz tune spinning like memory. Evelyn moves through it all like she belongs to the rhythm, balancing mugs, remembering orders, reading faces. Her hands shake a little, but not enough to spill, not enough to break the illusion. At the register, Trent leans with the same smug ease, tapping the POS screen like it's his personal canvas. He doesn't look at the servers, doesn't have to. His smiles are saved for customers only. Then, Ramona steps out from the back office. Blazer pressed, posture upright, expression neutral. She surveys the room like she owns the air. She smiles at tables, nods at families, but her eyes don't meet Evelyn's. Not once. Everything looks normal, and that's the danger of it. The front door swings open. Jackson walks in, no apron, no hat, no pretense, just a sharp gray suit and shoes that echo against the tile. He walks with purpose. A storm in a still room. Silence swells around him. Conversations fade. Silverware pauses mid-air. A woman near the jukebox leans in and whispers to her husband. Recognition ripples like lightning. It's him, Jackson Pryor, the founder, the CEO, the man whose name is etched into every contract, every policy, every cornerstone of this brand. Ramona freezes mid-laugh, her smile stiffening. Trent straightens, color draining from his face. Evelyn glances up from a tray of mugs, breath caught, motion suspended. Jackson doesn't look left or right. He walks to the counter and places his hand firmly on it. This isn't a visit. It's a reckoning. "I'm Jackson Pryor," he says, voice calm, steady. Founder of Sunrise Café. Gasps ripple like tremors. Someone drops a spoon. "I've spent the past week working in this branch, serving, listening, watching." He lets the weight of it hang in the air. His gaze passes slowly over the room. Ramona pale, Trent rigid, Evelyn frozen mid-breath. "I came to understand why this cafe, one of our top performers, has the highest staff turnover in the district." He pauses, breathes. "What I found is not a system failure. It's a failure of conscience." He turns toward Evelyn, and it ends today. The silence is heavy now, like truth has taken shape. Clara leans toward Evelyn, whispering, "It's him. It's really him." Evelyn doesn't blink, doesn't speak, but her fingers touch the edge of her notebook inside her apron pocket. She doesn't smile. She just stands taller. Because for the first time in a long time, someone who could fix things isn't looking away. Jackson reaches into his coat and pulls out a sleek tablet. He places it on the counter and begins to tap. Numbers load, graphs building. "This," he says, "is the internal audit of tip transactions over the past 60 days. A chart appears. Bar after bar. Name after name. 76% of tips were rerouted into a fund labeled branch operations." He pauses. Looks up. A fund that doesn't exist in any official company policy. Another tab opens. 2 names sit beside tip access permissions. And now the entire cafe holds its breath. Only 2 names held the power to authorize the transfers: Ramona Ellis and Trent Myers. The moment their names appeared on the screen, a hush dropped over the cafe. A customer near the back muttered, "Unbelievable," under their breath. Ramona opened her mouth, but no sound came. Trent's jaw locked, his fists curled tight at his sides. Jackson didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The numbers did the talking, and this time, everyone was listening. Jackson tapped the screen again. The POS tracker lit up with a live feed. Every transaction, logged in real time. Who served, who processed, who received. Line after line scrolled across the display. Evelyn May, 82% of the table coverage that week. Her name next to nearly every coffee poured, every plate served, every smile offered. But not a single digital tip registered to her name. Jackson paused. Then the screen shifted. Every tip, regardless of who served the guest, was rerouted under one name: T. Myers. The cafe stilled. Even the regulars, those who never looked up from their crossword puzzles, now stared, their frowns deepening. Evelyn's eyes followed the data. Her expression didn't change. She had known. But now, finally, so did everyone else. Truth had stopped whispering. Now it was undeniable. Evelyn rose slowly, stepping out from behind the counter. Her hands trembled, but this time she didn't hide them. Her voice, when it came, was low, but certain. "I'm not asking for compensation," she said, eyes first on Jackson, then drifting to the room. "Not for back pay, not even an apology." She placed her hand on the counter, fingers weathered by decades of service, nails chipped, but her grip steady. "I just want the system to see me," she said. Her voice cracked slightly. Not as a mistake, not as a shadow, but as the person who stood here, day after day, and earned it. She looked toward the glowing screen. Trent's name still flashed there, bold and detached from the labor behind it. "I served those tables. I earned every one of those tips." Silence, heavy, true. Clara stepped forward, her voice small but unwavering. "They made me sign something," she said, her eyes on the floor. "A non-disclosure. They told me it was about scheduling, but when I asked why my tips were missing, they said if I kept pushing, I'd be rotated out." Gasps. Stirring. A man near the window said, "That's not right." A woman beside him folded her arms tight and nodded. Another customer raised their voice. "I always tipped Evelyn, every Sunday." Murmurs turned into movement. "They deserve better. You can't treat people like this." The truth had cracked the room open. The silence that once protected power was gone. Clara turned to Evelyn. "We were quiet because we had to be," she said. "But now, we don't have to anymore." That afternoon, without spectacle or announcement, word traveled from the back office. Ramona was placed on immediate suspension, pending full investigation. No speech, no protest. Trent handed over his credentials quietly to Jackson. No resistance, just silence. A different kind of exit. An IT rep stepped forward, and within minutes, the POS system began updating in real time. Names reloaded, permissions reset. A new rule written into every register across all branches. Server name equals tip recipient. No more reroutes, no more shadows. At table 6, Evelyn processed her first digital tip, and for the first time, her name, Evelyn May, appeared clearly on the screen. Bold, centered, unquestionable, No glitch, no override, just truth. Later that week, Jackson met Evelyn in the booth by the window, the one she always cleaned first each morning. He placed a folder on the table. Veteran Staff Honor Program. "We're starting something new," he said. "Company-wide, a program to recognize senior staff, not just plaques, real purpose." He looked at her with respect, not charity. "I want you to help lead it." Evelyn blinked. "Me? You've seen more than most, and still, you showed up every day." He slid the folder closer. "Official title, HR Advisor, your voice at the table." Evelyn smiled, soft, real. She didn't say yes. She didn't have to. She was finally being asked, and meant. She closed the folder gently, fingers lingering on the cover. Then she shook her head. Slow, but sure. "Thank you, Jackson, but I don't want a title." He raised an eyebrow. "Curious. I want to stay right here," she said, looking around the cafe. "This is my place, my people, and I've got a tea afternoon to set up this weekend. Regulars are already asking about lemon cookies." A small smile. "I've been invisible too long to sit behind a desk now." Jackson nodded. No argument, no push, just understanding. Because Evelyn knew what mattered. Not recognition on paper, but presence where it counted. That Saturday, 8 regulars gathered near the back, where the light was soft and laughter felt like home. Mismatched teacups, handmade napkins, steam rising from ceramic pots. The jukebox hummed Moon River. Evelyn moved between them, not a server, but a host. She poured tea, asked about grandkids and gardens. Laughter followed her like light. Across the cafe, Jackson watched silently. This wasn't performance. It was presence. And it filled the space more than prophets ever could. Clara didn't wear her apron anymore. No double shifts. But she came in every Tuesday, wearing a soft scarf and peace on her face. She'd received a white envelope in the mail. Inside, a card from Sunrise Café and a letter. May Fund Health Assistance, approved. Jackson's signature at the bottom. No speech, just dignity. She placed the letter beside her medicine. For the first time, she didn't have to choose between groceries and care. When Evelyn asked how she was feeling, Clara smiled. Lighter. It wasn't retirement. It was relief. Evelyn turned back to table 7, the man who always left exact change. She poured his tea, wiped her hands, and glanced at the register screen. Her breath caught. Evelyn May. Tip, $3.75. No asterisk, no override, just her name. She didn't speak, just stared, steady. One hand on the counter, the other near her apron pocket. So small, just a few digits. But it wasn't the number that mattered. It was the name, and that it was finally hers. At the back booth, Jackson sat alone, his coat folded beside him, a fresh coffee untouched. He opened a small leather notebook, corners worn, pages soft. In his own handwriting he wrote, "Justice doesn't arrive with noise. It comes quietly, when someone chooses not to look away." He underlined the last line once. Outside, the light turned golden. The cafe buzzed with comfort, cups clinking, chairs sliding, Evelyn's laughter rising. Jackson closed the notebook, leaned back, watched. Not as CEO, just as a man who finally saw what needed to be seen.